When HOA President Cordelia Whitmore parked her $300,000 Bentley across my barn door at 6 a.m., blocking my bleeding horse from getting to the vet, she made the costliest mistake of her entitled life. My horse was down, gushing blood from a wire fence gash. Every second mattered before he bled out. But there she stood in silk pajamas, sipping coffee, watching me panic. "Emergency, Fletcher? Paint your barn the approved beige color. Then we'll discuss emergencies." The diesel fumes from my idling truck mixed with her expensive perfume. 30 years I'd been the helpful neighbor who fixed everyone's problems and plowed their driveways for free. That morning, my patience flatlined with my horse. She didn't know I owned a bulldozer, or that her precious Bentley was about to become a very expensive pancake. What would you do if someone blocked your dying animal? Drop your location, share your HOA nightmare below. 6 months earlier, I thought Cordelia Whitmore was just another entitled neighbor. I was wrong. She was something much worse, a predator in designer athleisure hunting for her next victim. My name's Fletcher Donovan, 52, retired heavy equipment operator who still runs weekend construction jobs. For 30 years, I'd lived peacefully on my 2.3 acres in Willowbrook Estates, back when it was all farmland where nobody gave a damn what color your barn was or whether your rooster crowed too loud at sunrise. My property came with a grandfather clause protecting everything. My forest green barn that my daddy built in 1987, my workshop filled with the sweet smell of motor oil and sawdust, even that 30-ton bulldozer parked behind the tool shed. All legal, all mine, all about to become Cordelia's personal obsession. She moved in 18 months ago with her real estate developer husband Travis, bringing the kind of money that smells like future construction loans and political connections. Picture this: platinum hair that defies both physics and humidity, designer workout clothes she never actually sweats in, and a smile colder than a morgue freezer. The first time I heard her stilettos clicking like gunshots across my gravel driveway, I should have known war was coming. Fletcher. Not hello, not good morning, not even a polite nod. Just my name pronounced like it left a bad taste in her mouth. That barn is a community eyesore. You'll paint it desert sand number 47 within 30 days. I politely explained the grandfather clause, showing her the original property documents. She examined them with those pale blue eyes, then laughed, this crystalline sound like expensive champagne glasses shattering against marble. Grandfather clauses don't override declining property values, sweetie. Welcome to civilization. That laugh was her declaration of war. Week 1 brought a violation notice for excessive animal odor. My 12-year-old rescue horse bathes himself more regularly than some humans I know. Week 2, official complaint about industrial noise pollution. Apparently my 20-year-old Chevy pickup sounds like a Boeing 747 taking off to her delicate ears. Week 3 was when things turned vicious. She accidentally reported unsafe electrical wiring, getting my power shut off for 3 days while I fought through county bureaucracy. The smell of spoiled food from my powerless refrigerator mixed with my rising anger. By month 2, she'd graduated to psychological warfare. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., when I was feeding my horse and administering his arthritis medication, she'd appear with her clipboard and smartphone camera, documenting my ongoing violations while sipping coffee from a crystal mug that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I tried being reasonable, filed counter complaints with the county, even paid some of her ridiculous fines just to maintain neighborhood peace. But my neighbors were suffering the same systematic harassment. Elderly widow Martha got cited for unauthorized garden gnomes. Disabled veteran Jim faced daily penalties because his service dog barked at delivery trucks. Nobody fought back. Cordelia had mastered this psychological trick of making grown adults feel like ungrateful peasants living in her royal kingdom, lucky to breathe her recycled air. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer when I researched property records at the county courthouse. Travis Whitmore owns 40 acres directly behind our development, Willowbrook Phase 2, according to the filed plans, and guess whose property sits exactly where they want to build their grand entrance road? The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth when I saw those blueprints. Yesterday morning's accident was genuinely random construction noise from Whitmore's current project spooked my horse, sending him crashing through that old barbed wire fence at our property line. When I found him at dawn, blood was pooling in the yellow straw, that familiar iron scent mixing with hay dust and morning dew. This was serious. Dr. Sarah Blake said, "Bring him immediately. Deep gashes need professional stitches before blood loss becomes critical. Her clinic opens at 7 a.m. sharp, and I had an emergency slot reserved. I fired up my diesel truck, its rumble usually comforting but somehow ominous this particular morning, connected the horse trailer, mind already calculating the fastest route to town. That's when I spotted the white Bentley positioned like a middle finger across my barn door. My bulldozer sat 30 feet away, prepped for weekend work. 30 tons of American steel I'd operated professionally for 3 decades. Still maintained my commercial license in construction. You never know when you'll need to move something heavy. Standing there in silk pajamas, watching my panic with obvious satisfaction, Cordelia had finally crossed the wrong line. Some people think property laws are suggestions. Others believe HOA authority trumps constitutional rights. But I know something they don't. Emergency access supersedes everything, and there's no statute against using proper equipment to clear obstacles from your own driveway, especially when someone's gambling with an innocent animal's life for their real estate schemes. The morning air was crisp enough to see my breath when I walked up to that gleaming white Bentley. Frost covered the windshield like diamonds on velvet, mocking the gravity of my situation. She stood beside her $300,000 status symbol in silk pajamas that probably cost more than most people's car payments, sipping coffee from what looked like genuine Waterford crystal. "Morning, Fletcher," she purred, like we were old friends meeting for Sunday brunch instead of a woman deliberately blocking my dying horse's path to medical care. "Lovely morning for a property inspection, don't you think?" "Move the car, Cordelia." My voice stayed level, though my hands were already clenching. Behind me, the metallic scent of blood mixed with hay dust drifted from the barn. "I've got a medical emergency here." Her laugh tinkled across the morning silence like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Emergency? The only emergency I see is your continued violation of community aesthetic standards. That barn's been an eyesore for 6 months. My horse whinnied in pain, a sound that cuts straight through your soul if you've ever loved an animal. Blood was still seeping through the makeshift bandage I'd wrapped around his leg with trembling hands 20 minutes earlier. Every second we wasted discussing paint colors was another minute closer to serious blood loss. As HOA president, Cordelia continued, pulling out her iPhone to record our conversation, I have the legal authority to inspect any property violations before allowing access. That's when I remembered something my nephew Jake had mentioned during last month's family barbecue. He'd been ranting about a case where some fake HOA president got sued for harassment because she'd never been properly elected. I pulled out my own phone and hit record. "Actually, Cordelia, you might want to double-check that authority claim." Her smile faltered slightly, like ice cracking on a pond. "What do you mean?" "I mean HOA presidents need to be legally elected through documented voting procedures filed with the county clerk. You can't just declare yourself queen of the neighborhood and start issuing royal decrees." I'd learned this the hard way after months of her harassment, spending evenings at the courthouse researching property law instead of watching TV. Turns out there's a whole process for HOA governance that Cordelia had completely ignored. "I was unanimously selected by the board," she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its confident edge. "What board?" "Margaret Blake moved to Florida 6 months ago, and Bill Santos never agreed to serve a second term. There hasn't been a legal HOA board since 2019, which makes every violation notice you've issued about as official as a grocery list." Her pale blue eyes flickered with something between rage and panic, but instead of backing down like a reasonable person, she doubled down on stupid. "Fine. Then I'm conducting a citizen's health and safety inspection. That animal odor could be affecting everyone's property values, and I have every right to—" The rumble of Dan Morrison's Harley-Davidson cut through her entitled speech like a chainsaw through silk. Dan's a retired police sergeant who starts his morning ride at exactly 6:30 a.m., rain or shine. More importantly, he's got zero tolerance for neighborhood bullies and keeps his phone handy for recording evidence. Instead of riding past like usual, Dan pulled into my driveway. At 68, he still looked like he could arrest half the county with one hand tied behind his back. He killed his engine and surveyed the scene with 30 years of law enforcement experience. "Morning, Fletcher. We got a problem here?" "Mrs. Whitmore's blocking my access to get my injured horse to the vet," I said, keeping my voice calm and factual. "Animal's bleeding pretty bad, and every minute counts." Dan's weathered face hardened as he took in the Bentley positioned perfectly across my barn door, then glanced toward the barn where my horse's increasingly desperate sounds echoed in the morning air. Ma'am, you're going to need to move that vehicle. Now. I don't have to do anything, Cordelia snapped, her entitled attitude shifting into maximum overdrive. This is legitimate HOA business, and I have every legal right to investigate potential violations before— The only thing you have the right to do, Dan interrupted, his voice carrying 3 decades of dealing with difficult people, is move your car or explain to the sheriff why you're interfering with emergency animal care on private property. I watched Cordelia's face cycle through emotions like a broken slot machine: anger, confusion, fear, then back to defiant rage. She clearly wasn't accustomed to people who didn't immediately cave to her intimidation tactics and legal threats. This is absolutely ridiculous, she sputtered, gesturing wildly with her crystal mug. I'm trying to protect this community's standards, and that industrial equipment back there probably violates 6 different zoning ordinances. She pointed toward my bulldozer with a perfectly manicured finger, apparently not realizing she'd just handed me the perfect opening. That equipment is legally permitted for construction work, I said calmly, and it's particularly effective at clearing unauthorized obstacles from private driveways. Dan's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest thing to approval I'd seen from him in years. The sound of my horse's pain cut through our standoff like a scream. Blood was pooling on the concrete where I'd tried to examine his wound. Cordelia clutched her coffee mug tighter and made the decision that would cost her everything. Instead of getting in her car and driving away, she sat down on her Bentley's pristine hood and crossed her arms like a toddler having a tantrum. "Make me move it," she challenged. So I walked toward my bulldozer. The 30-yard walk to my bulldozer felt like a funeral march, my work boots crunching through frost-covered grass while Cordelia perched on her Bentley's hood like some deranged peacock, still clutching that crystal coffee mug like it could somehow protect her from 30 tons of American steel. My Caterpillar D6 sat where I'd parked it yesterday, prepped for weekend foundation work. The smell of hydraulic fluid and diesel fuel hit me as I climbed into the familiar cab sense that meant honest work and problem solving. 25 years of operating heavy machinery had taught me that sometimes the best communication happens through horsepower. The engine turned over with a rumble that shook frost off nearby trees and rattled windows 3 houses down. Through my windshield, I watched Cordelia's smugness evaporate faster than morning dew. But instead of moving her car like any sane person would, she doubled down on stupid. "You're bluffing!" She screamed over the diesel roar, sliding off her hood but planting herself directly in front of the Bentley. "I know your type, Fletcher. All bark, no bite. You don't have the balls to actually—" Her insult was interrupted by Dan Morrison's phone buzzing. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, then walked over to my cab with a grin that could have powered the neighborhood. "Fletcher, that was my buddy at Channel 4. News crew's 3 minutes out. Apparently someone called about a domestic bulldozer situation." He winked. "Might want to make sure your story's camera ready." That's when Cordelia made her most vicious move yet. Pulling out her own phone, she speed-dialed someone while glaring directly at me. "Travis?" "Yes, it's urgent. Call the bank about Fletcher Donovan's construction loans. Tell them he's using company equipment for personal vendettas." She paused, listening. "I don't care if it's Saturday morning. Wake someone up." My blood went cold. She was trying to destroy my livelihood over a barn paint color. But I remembered something my old foreman used to say. When someone throws a punch, you throw a bulldozer. I engaged the hydraulics, and the blade began its slow, inevitable descent, with that distinctive whining sound that every construction worker recognizes as the voice of unstoppable force meeting immovable object. The scrape of metal positioning echoed across the neighborhood like a war cry. From my elevated cab position, I could see neighbors emerging from their houses. Mrs. Patterson stood in her bathrobe with coffee, Jim Santos wheeled onto his porch for a better view, and the Johnson kids had their faces pressed against their living room window like it was Christmas morning. Then, Channel 4's news van rounded the corner at exactly the wrong moment for Cordelia and exactly the right moment for justice. Reporter Amanda Blake jumped out with her cameraman, immediately recognizing a story that would own social media for weeks. This is Amanda Blake, Channel 4 News, where a neighborhood dispute has escalated to involve heavy machinery. Cordelia's eyes went wide as she realized her tantrum was about to become regional television. But instead of backing down, she performed for the cameras. "This man is threatening me with industrial equipment," she shrieked, pointing dramatically at my bulldozer. "I'm simply trying to enforce community standards and he's responding with violence." I shut off the engine so my voice would carry clearly to the microphones. "Ma'am, my horse is bleeding to death in that barn, and you're blocking my access to emergency veterinary care. I've asked you politely to move. Now I'm asking professionally." The cameraman panned to show the blood trail on concrete, the blocked barn door, and my horse's desperate whinnying echoing in the morning air. Even through television cameras, the evidence was undeniable. But here's something I learned from my nephew Jake during his law school days. Property owners have absolute emergency access rights on their own land, especially for medical situations involving animals. Courts consistently rule that temporary property damage is justified when preventing permanent injury or death. "Sir," Amanda addressed me, "are you actually planning to push that car with a bulldozer?" "Ma'am, in Tennessee, property owners can remove any obstacle preventing emergency access on their own land, using whatever equipment necessary. I've got a dying horse, a blocked driveway, and a woman who's refused multiple requests to move." Cordelia's face twisted with rage as she realized the legal ground was shifting beneath her designer slippers. "You can't just destroy someone's property because you feel like it." "You're right," I said, restarting the engine. "But I can remove obstacles from my own driveway to save an animal's life." The law is pretty clear about emergency access. Dan Morrison stepped into camera range with his retired cop authority. "Ma'am, you've got about 10 seconds to move that vehicle before this becomes a very expensive lesson in property rights." Cordelia looked around desperately for support, but every neighbor who'd suffered her harassment stood watching with barely concealed satisfaction. She made one final mistake, pulling out her phone to live stream her own victimization to social media. "Everyone watch this. This psychopath is about to destroy my car because I won't let him violate HOA rules." I dropped the blade to bumper height, engaged forward gear, and gave her exactly what she'd asked for: a front row seat to 30 tons of consequences. The first contact between my bulldozer blade and her Bentley's rear bumper sounded like a champagne cork popping at a funeral. Metal meeting metal, with the sweet inevitability of karma finally catching up to 6 months of harassment. The pristine white paint cracked like an eggshell as 30 tons of American justice pressed against 2 tons of German arrogance. Cordelia's scream could have shattered windows 3 counties over. "You're actually doing it. This is insane. Someone call 911. Through my cab window, I watched Amanda Blake's eyes light up like Christmas morning. Her cameraman was capturing everything: the blade slowly compressing luxury engineering, Cordelia's horror movie reaction, and neighbors abandoning their coffee to witness live-action justice in high definition. The physics were poetry in motion. Hydraulic pressure doesn't negotiate with entitlement or compromise with designer labels. The Bentley's trunk crumpled like expensive aluminum foil as I maintained steady forward pressure, the distinctive crunch of $300,000 becoming scrap metal filling the October air with mechanical music. But here's where Cordelia proved that stupidity truly knows no bounds. Instead of accepting defeat gracefully, she pulled out her iPhone and started live streaming her own destruction to Facebook Live. "Everyone needs to witness this domestic terrorism. This psychopath is destroying my property because I tried to protect our community values." What she didn't realize, thanks to my nephew Jake's legal education during family barbecues, was that she was creating evidence against herself. Every shrieked word about protecting community values proved she'd been acting under false authority. Every tear over her destroyed property showed she valued German engineering over animal welfare. The rear window exploded inward with a sound like crystal chandelier hitting marble floors, showering the leather interior with safety glass that sparkled like diamonds on black velvet. My blade kept pushing forward with relentless precision, turning status symbol into cautionary tale. That's when the mini twist arrived in a Range Rover moving fast enough to leave rubber on the asphalt. Travis Whitmore screeched into my neighbor's driveway, jumping out in golf clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. But instead of rushing to save his wife's car, he immediately started taking pictures with his phone, not of the destruction, but of the news crew and crowd of witnesses. "Don't say anything else, Cordelia," he shouted, his real estate developer brain apparently calculating damage control faster than emotional support. "You're being recorded." Too late. His wife had already live-streamed 6 minutes of incriminating evidence to 300 Facebook followers who were sharing it faster than gossip at a church social. Your wife blocked emergency access to save my bleeding horse. I called down from my cab, never stopping the forward pressure that was turning Bentley into abstract art. She refused multiple requests to move. Now she's getting a masterclass in property rights. The sound was getting absolutely beautiful metal screaming its death song as German precision engineering met American agricultural stubbornness. The hydraulic whine of my blade adjusting pressure, the distinctive pop of expensive trim pieces surrendering to physics. Dan Morrison stepped closer to the news microphone with retired cop authority. Tennessee Code Annotated Section 55-10-402. Property owners can remove obstacles during medical emergencies using necessary force. This is textbook lawful action. Travis's face went whiter than his wife's destroyed car as he realized this wasn't just property damage. This was legal property rights enforcement being broadcast live across Middle Tennessee. His development business reputation was getting crushed along with his wife's luxury vehicle. The Bentley was now compressed to about 60% of original length, looking like some kind of modern art installation titled Consequences. The front remained pristine while everything behind the driver's seat had been systematically transformed into expensive origami. But Cordelia's final mistake was yet to come. "I'll sue you for everything!" she screamed at my cab, mascara streaming down her cheeks like black tears of justice. "My insurance will cover this, and then I'll take your house, your business, your precious horse." She turned to the news camera with pure venom. "This animal doesn't even deserve medical care. It's probably diseased anyway, and this neighborhood would be better off without—" The collective gasp from 30 neighbors cut her off mid-sentence. Even Travis stepped back from his wife like she'd grown a second head. Amanda Blake's eyebrows shot up as she realized Cordelia had just threatened animal cruelty on live television. "Did she just say my horse doesn't deserve medical care?" I asked the crowd, shutting off my engine so everyone could hear clearly. The silence was filled only by my horse's desperate whinnying from the barn and Cordelia's ragged breathing as she realized she'd just revealed her true character to 3 counties' worth of television viewers. "Cordelia," Travis whispered, his voice hollow with the sound of a man watching his reputation die in real time. "What have you done?" I restarted the engine and dropped the blade for the final push. "What she's done, Travis, is show everyone exactly who she really is. And now everyone gets to watch her learn what happens when bullies meet bulldozers." The Bentley's roof buckled like cheap tin as I prepared to finish what her arrogance had started. The final crunch of German engineering surrendering to American steel echoed across the neighborhood like a judge's gavel. Where Cordelia's $300,000 Bentley had once gleamed sat a cube of compressed metal worth maybe $50 at the scrapyard. The morning air smelled of hydraulic fluid, shattered dreams, and sweet, sweet justice. Cordelia sat in my driveway surrounded by crystal fragments, staring at her destroyed status symbol like she was watching her own funeral. Black mascara rivers carved trenches down her cheeks while her silk pajamas absorbed the cold reality of consequences. From the barn, my horse's whinnying had grown weaker, a sound that cut through my satisfaction like a blade. Blood was still pooling where I'd tried to examine his wound 20 minutes ago. Every second of this circus had been borrowed time from an animal's life. "Fletcher Donovan?" Sheriff Maria Martinez approached, her squad car's lights painting the wreckage in red and blue. At 55, she'd seen every flavor of county stupidity, but even she paused at the sight of a pancaked Bentley. "Got multiple calls about creative property dispute resolution." "Sheriff," I nodded, wiping hydraulic fluid off my hands. "Woman blocked my emergency access to get my injured horse to the vet. Asked her politely to move. She refused. So I moved her." Martinez surveyed the blood trail from barn to driveway, the compressed car, and Cordelia's complete emotional breakdown. "Emergency access laws are pretty straightforward in Tennessee. Property owners can clear obstacles preventing medical care, but that's when Dan Morrison dropped the real bombshell. Sheriff, there's something else." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through screenshots. "Cordelia's been posting about this on our neighborhood Facebook group for months. Look at this. Successfully timed morning inspection to maximize compliance pressure. And this? Strategic access blocking during emergency call creates negotiating advantage." My blood went cold. She'd been documenting her harassment campaign like some kind of twisted hobby. Martina's expression hardened as Dan kept reading. "HOA enforcement requires psychological pressure. Fletcher's animal attachment is his weakness. Sheriff, she's been planning this psychological warfare for months. Amanda Blake's cameraman swung to capture Cordelia's face as she realized her own social media had become evidence against her. Her Facebook live stream was still running, broadcasting her destruction to an audience that had swelled to over 3,000 viewers sharing her downfall across social media. There's more, Dan continued. County Clerk's office has no record of HOA elections since 2019. Every violation notice she issued was legally meaningless. The smell of diesel exhaust couldn't mask the stench of Cordelia's crumbling authority as Travis pulled up in his Range Rover, golf clothes wrinkled from what was probably a panic drive across town. He surveyed the wreckage with the hollow expression of a man calculating bankruptcy. That's when my nephew Jake appeared, probably alerted by the neighborhood drama network. His lawyer's briefcase looked out of place among the machinery and destruction, but his timing was perfect. "Uncle Fletcher," he called, pulling documents from his case. "I've been researching the Whitmore development loans you asked about last month." He handed papers to Sheriff Martinez. Travis Whitmore's company owes $2.3 million due December 1st. Phase 2 development can't start without access through Fletcher's property. This harassment wasn't about paint colors. It was attempted theft through fraudulent authority. Travis's face went ashen as his financial desperation became public record on live television. Cordelia's sobs intensified as she realized her bullying campaign had just become criminal conspiracy. But my horse's weakening cries reminded everyone what really mattered here. "Can I save my animal now?" I asked Martinez. "Or do you need more evidence that emergency access trumps property damage?" She gestured toward the now clear path to my barn. "Road's open, Fletcher." Sometimes justice requires heavy equipment. The scent of morning dew mixed with crushed luxury as I finally headed toward my horse, leaving Cordelia to count the true cost of blocking the wrong farmer's driveway. 2 hours later, my horse was stitched up and stable at Dr. Blake's clinic, pumped full of antibiotics and pain medication. 37 stitches to close the gash, but he'd live to see another sunrise. The sweet smell of antiseptic and horse liniment had never been more welcome than the stench of Cordelia's destroyed arrogance still lingering in my driveway. But while I was saving an animal's life, the internet was having a field day with Cordelia's downfall. Amanda Blake's news story had gone viral faster than gossip at a church social. "Tennessee man uses bulldozer to clear path for injured horse" was trending on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. The video of my blade compressing her Bentley had been shared over 50,000 times in 3 hours, with comments ranging from "hero" into "this is what happens when Karens meet consequences." My phone started buzzing with interview requests before I'd even left the vet clinic. Good Morning America, Fox News, CNN apparently crushing entitled neighbors' cars as national news when it involves emergency animal care. Who knew? Jake was waiting in my kitchen when I got home, laptop open, legal documents spread across my table like battle plans. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the lingering diesel fumes from my clothes created an oddly comforting atmosphere. "Uncle Fletcher, you need to see this," he said, pulling up Cordelia's Facebook page. "She's been documenting her harassment campaign for 6 months. Look at these posts. Day 47 of HOA compliance enforcement. Fletcher's resistance weakening under consistent pressure. She literally created a written record of stalking behavior." I leaned over his shoulder, reading months of posts that painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare disguised as community service. She'd photographed my property, tracked my daily routine, even documented my horse's medication schedule to find the most vulnerable moments for her inspections. "This is sociopathic behavior," Jake continued, scrolling through screenshots neighbors had been sending him. "And she posted it all publicly, thinking she was the hero of her own story." The irony was beautiful. Cordelia's need for social media validation had created the perfect evidence trail for harassment charges. Every post, every photo, every smug comment about teaching Fletcher respect was now Exhibit A in what Jake was calling an open and shut case of fraud and intimidation. Dan Morrison knocked on my back door, carrying a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Fletcher, you need to see what the neighborhood's been hiding from Cordelia's reign of terror." He spread out printed emails, text messages, and recorded phone calls from 23 different households. Elderly Martha had been fined $150 daily for her garden gnomes until she'd removed decorations her late husband had carved by hand. Disabled veteran Jim faced harassment about his service dog's barking, despite the animal being legally protected. Young Mother Sarah had been cited for children's toys in her own backyard. She wasn't just targeting you, Dan explained, his retired cop instincts cataloging evidence like he was building a federal case. She was systematically terrorizing anyone who wouldn't immediately submit to her authority. Classic predator behavior: isolate, intimidate, dominate. The smell of Jake's legal expertise mixed with Dan's investigative experience as they compiled what looked like a prosecutor's dream case. But the real goldmine was Cordelia's own documentation. "Look at this," Jake said, pulling up her Instagram account. She posted photos inside people's properties during her inspections. That's trespassing. She recorded conversations without consent. That's wiretapping in Tennessee. She sent threatening letters on fake HOA letterhead. That's mail fraud. My kitchen table had become mission control for dismantling 6 months of neighborhood terrorism, one legal violation at a time. The afternoon sun streamed through my windows, highlighting dust motes that danced like celebrations in the warm air. But the best news came when Dr. Blake called with an update on my horse. "He's going to be fine, Fletcher. Clean stitches, no sign of infection. You got him here just in time, another hour, and we might have lost him to blood loss." That evening, Channel 4 ran a follow-up story that made Cordelia's morning humiliation look like a warm-up act. Amanda Blake had spent the day interviewing neighbors, county officials, and legal experts. The picture that emerged wasn't just one woman crushing a car, it was an entire community finally fighting back against systematic abuse. Property rights attorney Michael Stevens says this case could set important precedents, Amanda reported. When fake authorities use harassment to force property sales, emergency access laws provide powerful legal protection for homeowners. There's something you should know about Tennessee property law that most HOA bullies never research. Emergency access rights are absolute. When someone blocks your path to medical care on your own property, you can use whatever force is necessary to clear that obstacle. Courts consistently rule that temporary property damage is justified to prevent permanent injury or death. The takeaway? Document everything, know your rights, and remember that emergency medical access trumps luxury car preservation every single time. By sunset, my quiet little farm had become the unofficial headquarters of a neighborhood liberation movement. 20 families had contacted Jake about filing a class action lawsuit against Cordelia for harassment under false authority. The smell of justice mixed with evening barbecue smoke as neighbors gathered on my property for the first time in months without fear of violation notices. Sometimes it takes 30 tons of steel to remind bullies that property rights aren't suggestions. They're constitutional guarantees backed by the full weight of American law and heavy machinery. Monday morning arrived with the sweet sound of silence, no stiletto heels clicking across my gravel, no clipboard-wielding tyrant documenting my violations. Just the peaceful rustle of October leaves and my coffee brewing in blessed anonymity. But Cordelia wasn't done making mistakes. By 9 a.m., she'd already called my insurance company claiming I'd committed premeditated vehicular assault with my bulldozer. Her voice, shrill with desperation, echoed through my kitchen when the adjuster called for my side of the story. "Ma'am," I heard him tell her during a three-way call, "your own Facebook live stream shows you refusing multiple requests to move your vehicle during an animal medical emergency. Our legal department says this falls under Tennessee's emergency access statutes." The sound of Cordelia's shriek through the phone speaker was better than morning bird song, but her insurance company delivered the real knockout punch. Turns out comprehensive coverage doesn't apply when you deliberately use your vehicle to block emergency medical access. Her $300,000 Bentley pancake was now her $300,000 personal problem, and the smell of financial ruin was apparently stronger than her usual expensive perfume. That's when things got really interesting. Travis showed up at my door Tuesday afternoon, still in his golf clothes but looking like he'd aged 10 years since watching his wife's car get compressed. The desperation in his eyes reminded me of a cornered rat, and rats do stupid things when they're scared. "Fletcher, we need to talk business," he said, holding out an envelope thick with legal documents. "I'm prepared to offer you $800,000 for your property. Cash deal, close in 30 days. I looked at the papers without touching them, breathing in the sweet scent of panic mixed with his cologne. "That's twice what you offered 6 months ago, Travis." Funny how emergency bulldozer demonstrations affect property valuations. His laugh sounded like grinding gears in a broken transmission. Look, what Cordelia did was wrong, but we're all neighbors here. No need to let this escalate further. But here's something about construction loans that most people don't understand. When you owe $2.3 million due December 1st and your only way to pay requires a specific piece of property, that property owner holds all the cards. Banks don't negotiate payment extensions when developers can't deliver promised access roads. Travis, I said, leaning against my doorframe while he sweated through his polo shirt. I'm not selling to you today, tomorrow, or next decade. But I am curious why you think I'd help the man whose wife nearly killed my horse for her real estate schemes. The mini twist came when Jake arrived with Sheriff Martinez and a handful of documents that made Travis go whiter than his wife's destroyed Bentley. Mr. Whitmore, Martinez announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and filing false insurance claims. Turns out Travis had been busy since Monday, filing claims that I'd threatened him with the bulldozer to force property sales. He'd even created fake text messages showing me demanding money to not destroy more of their property. Too bad for him that cell phone records don't lie, and Jake's legal connections run deep through the county prosecutor's office. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut on Travis's wrists was poetry in motion. His golf buddies wouldn't be seeing him at the country club for a while, and his construction company's reputation was about to become as flat as his wife's luxury car. But Cordelia's next move proved that stupidity really doesn't have a bottom limit. Wednesday morning, she showed up at Channel 4's studio demanding airtime to correct the record about domestic terrorism in Willowbrook Estates. Amanda Blake, being a professional journalist with a nose for great television, invited her on camera for a live interview. Mrs. Whitmore, Amanda asked with the innocent tone of a shark smelling blood, do you regret blocking emergency access to Mr. Donovan's injured horse? I regret living in a neighborhood where psychopaths are allowed to own military-grade equipment, Cordelia snapped, her composure cracking like eggshells. That man is a danger to society, and that filthy animal probably deserved to suffer for violating community health standards. The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Threatening animal cruelty on live television isn't just morally repugnant in Tennessee, it's a felony that carries real prison time. Amanda's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Are you saying the horse deserved to be injured, Mrs. Whitmore? I'm saying animals that don't meet community standards shouldn't receive preferential treatment over human property rights. Cordelia doubled down, apparently not realizing she was digging her own legal grave on regional television. The interview ended with Cordelia storming off set, leaving Amanda to explain to viewers that they'd just witnessed someone confess to animal cruelty conspiracy on live television. The smell of career suicide mixed with studio lighting created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a bulldozer blade. By Thursday, Cordelia faced criminal charges for harassment, fraud, false authority claims, and now animal endangerment. Her social media accounts had been suspended for promoting harmful content, and 3 different attorneys had dropped her as a client. Sometimes justice comes with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with 30 tons of American steel, and sometimes it comes when bullies can't stop talking long enough to realize they're confessing their crimes to television cameras. The sweet sound of consequences never gets old. By Friday, the circus had officially come to town. News vans lined my street like military vehicles at a compound raid, their satellite dishes reaching toward heaven while reporters trampled my neighbors' flower beds hunting for the perfect David versus Goliath angle. The smell of diesel exhaust from generator trucks mixed with October leaves and the unmistakable scent of media-feeding frenzy. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since Wednesday's television disaster. Good Morning America wanted a live interview. The Today Show offered to fly me to New York. 3 different podcast hosts promised to tell my side of the story. Even some reality TV producer called about a show called Bulldozer Justice, featuring homeowners fighting HOA tyranny with heavy machinery. But the real entertainment was watching Cordelia's final public meltdown. She'd barricaded herself in her house since Thursday, but the legal pressure was building like steam in a boiler. Jake had filed a civil suit for harassment, emotional distress, and interference with medical care. The county prosecutor was preparing criminal charges for fraud and animal endangerment. Her insurance company had officially denied all claims related to deliberate obstruction of emergency services. That's when she made her last, most spectacular mistake. Friday afternoon, Cordelia called a press conference on her own front lawn, apparently convinced she could spin public opinion back in her favor. She'd hired some bottom-tier attorney who looked like he'd gotten his law degree from a cereal box, and together they faced a crowd of reporters hungry for blood. "My client has been the victim of a coordinated campaign of domestic terrorism," the lawyer announced, his voice cracking under pressure from 20 microphones. "Mr. Donovan used industrial equipment to assault Mrs. Whitmore's property in an unprovoked attack motivated by class resentment and anti-authority extremism." The crowd of neighbors who'd gathered to watch this legal suicide started laughing, actually laughing out loud at the absurdity. Martha, the elderly widow with the garden gnomes, was giggling so hard she had to hold onto her walker for support. But Cordelia wasn't done destroying herself yet. "I want everyone to understand," she announced, stepping up to the microphones with the confidence of someone who'd completely lost touch with reality, "that I was protecting this community from a dangerous individual who keeps wild animals and military weapons on residential property." Amanda Blake, who'd positioned herself front and center with her camera crew, couldn't hide her excitement. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you referring to Mr. Donovan's rescue horse as a wild animal? That creature has never been properly vaccinated or inspected by county health officials," Cordelia declared, apparently forgetting that veterinary records are public information. "For all we know, it's diseased and contaminating our groundwater." The mini twist came when Dr. Sarah Blake stepped out of the crowd, still wearing her veterinary clinic coat and holding a folder thick with medical records. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Blake called out in her crisp professional voice, "I've been treating Fletcher's horse for 3 years. His vaccinations are current, his health records are impeccable, and your harassment campaign nearly caused his death from blood loss." She handed copies of the medical records to Amanda Blake's cameraman, then turned to address the crowd directly. "This horse has provided therapy sessions for disabled children, participated in county fair educational programs, and has never posed any health risk to anyone. What posed a risk was delaying his emergency medical care for a real estate scheme." Cordelia's face went through more color changes than a traffic light as she realized a licensed veterinarian had just publicly demolished her animal health claims on live television. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, probably trying to end this disaster before she confessed to more felonies. But Cordelia was riding the crazy train straight to legal hell. "Fine!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the houses like a siren. "You want to know the truth? That barn is ugly. That horse smells. This entire neighborhood was perfect before Fletcher Donovan decided his property rights mattered more than community standards." The crowd fell silent as Cordelia finally revealed her true motivation: not health concerns, not legal authority, just pure aesthetic snobbery mixed with real estate greed. "I don't care about his grandfather clause or his emergency access or his bleeding animal," she continued, apparently not realizing she was confessing to criminal indifference to animal suffering. "Some things matter more than one man's selfish property obsession." Sheriff Martinez, who'd been watching from her patrol car, finally stepped forward with handcuffs gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, fraud under false authority, and animal endangerment." The sound of metal clicking shut around Cordelia's wrists was sweeter than church bells on Sunday morning. Her lawyer tried to object, but Martinez had enough evidence to prosecute half the county based on Cordelia's own public statements. As they loaded her into the patrol car, Cordelia pressed her face against the window and screamed one final threat. "This isn't over! I'll appeal everything. I'll sue everyone. The car door slamming shut cut off her rant mid-sentence, leaving the neighborhood in blessed silence, broken only by the sound of reporters frantically calling their editors with breaking news updates. Travis stood in his driveway watching his wife's arrest, probably calculating how many assets he'd need to liquidate for legal defense and wondering if his golf club would revoke his membership. Sometimes justice comes with a gavel, sometimes it comes with 30 tons of steel, and sometimes it comes when bullies can't stop talking long enough to realize they're digging their own graves on live television. The sweet smell of consequences had never been more satisfying. 3 weeks later, the Williamson County Courthouse smelled like justice, floor wax, and the nervous sweat of defendants who'd finally run out of appeals. Judge Rebecca Harrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years cutting through legal bullshit, presided over what local media had dubbed the Bentley Bulldozer trial of the century. The courtroom was packed tighter than a country music concert. Amanda Blake sat at the front row with her camera crew, ready to broadcast the conclusion of Tennessee's most viral property rights case. Behind her, 23 neighbors from Willowbrook Estates filled the gallery like a jury of Cordelia's victims, their faces showing 3 weeks of anticipation for this moment. Jake had prepared our case with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Evidence folders covered our table like battle plans, social media screenshots, harassment documentation, veterinary records, property law precedents, and Cordelia's own live-streamed confessions. The sweet smell of legal victory mixed with courthouse coffee and the lingering satisfaction of justice finally arriving. Cordelia sat at the defendant's table looking like a designer scarecrow, her usual platinum perfection replaced by county jail chic and the hollow expression of someone watching their entire world collapse in slow motion. Her third attorney, the first two had quit after reviewing her social media evidence, kept glancing at the door like he was calculating escape routes. "Your Honor," Jake began, his voice carrying the confidence of a man holding royal flush. "This case represents more than property damage. It represents the systematic harassment of law-abiding citizens by someone who assumed authority she never legally possessed." He played Cordelia's Facebook posts on the courtroom's projection screen. 6 months of documented harassment appeared in high definition. Photos of my property taken without permission, detailed schedules of my daily routine, celebration posts about successful enforcement actions, and most damning, her planning posts about strategic timing to maximize psychological pressure. The courtroom gasped audibly when Jake played her live stream from the morning of destruction. Cordelia's voice echoed through the speakers. "Make me move it!" Followed by the magnificent sound of German luxury meeting American justice. But the real mic drop moment came when District Attorney Michael Rodriguez took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the defendant didn't just harass Mr. Donovan. She documented her crimes obsessively, then broadcast them to the world thinking she was the hero of her own story." He played Cordelia's television interview where she'd claimed my horse deserved to suffer for violating community standards. The jury's collective intake of breath sounded like wind through a cemetery as they watched her confess to animal cruelty on regional television. But perhaps most revealing, Rodriguez continued, is the defendant's own explanation of her motivations during her arrest press conference. The courtroom speakers filled with Cordelia's shrieking voice. "I don't care about his emergency access or his bleeding animal." Some things matter more than one man's selfish property obsession. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. The defendant will rise for sentencing. Cordelia stood on shaking legs, her designer armor finally cracked beyond repair. The woman who'd terrorized an entire neighborhood now looked like a broken mannequin waiting for disposal. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Harrison's voice carried 30 years of judicial authority. "In my 3 decades on this bench, I've never seen such a clear case of harassment, fraud, and abuse of imagined authority. You systematically terrorized law-abiding citizens, endangered an innocent animal, and documented your crimes with the enthusiasm of someone who believed laws didn't apply to her." The judge's words echoed through the courthouse like thunder rolling across farmland. "Your actions represent everything wrong with unchecked authority and privileged entitlement. You turned neighborhood governance into personal vendetta, property rights into weapons of harassment, and emergency medical care into opportunities for real estate manipulation." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to courtroom silencing intensity. "But most damning is your complete lack of remorse. Even when caught, charged, and confronted with overwhelming evidence, you continued attacking your victims through media manipulation and legal intimidation." The gavel cracked again like divine judgment. "I hereby sentence you to 18 months in state prison for harassment under false authority, criminal conspiracy, and animal endangerment. Additionally, you'll pay $127,000 in restitution covering Mr. Donovan's legal costs, veterinary bills, and emotional distress damages." The courtroom erupted in applause from 23 neighbors who'd lived in fear of Cordelia's clipboard tyranny. Martha was crying tears of joy, Jim Santos was clapping with his good hand, and even the Johnson kids were cheering from the back row where their parents had brought them to witness the end of the neighborhood's darkest chapter. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished delivering justice. "Furthermore," she continued as bailiffs approached Cordelia's table, "you are permanently banned from serving in any HOA capacity in Tennessee, and your property harassment conviction will follow you to any state where you attempt to establish residence." As handcuffs clicked around Cordelia's wrists for the final time, I stood up in the gallery and spoke the words that would become my signature quote in every newspaper article about the case. Your Honor, sometimes bullies only understand one language. Mine happens to speak fluent Bulldozer. The courthouse erupted in laughter and applause as justice rolled out the door, leaving only the sweet smell of consequences and the promise that property rights still mean something in America. 6 months after the gavel fell on Cordelia's kingdom of clipboard terror, I'm sipping morning coffee in blessed silence while my horse grazes outside the window she once tried to force me to cover with approved window treatments. The October air smells like freedom, fresh hay, and the complete absence of stilettos clicking across my gravel driveway at dawn. My Bulldozer sits in the same spot where it crushed $300,000 worth of German entitlement, now decorated with children's handprints and a sign reading, Emergency Access Hero. Kids from the therapeutic riding program, we started leave drawings taped to the cab stick figure horses with cape-wearing bulldozers protecting them from evil HOA dragons. Cordelia lasted exactly 4 months in state prison before her cellmate, a woman doing time for check fraud, got tired of hearing about property value impacts and community aesthetic standards. Word is, she spent the rest of her sentence in protective custody, finally understanding what it feels like to live in fear of someone else's arbitrary authority. Travis sold their house to a young family with 3 kids and a golden retriever who immediately painted their front door bright purple just because they could. The new owners, the Martinez family, throw the kind of backyard barbecues that would have given Cordelia panic attacks, complete with bounce houses, mariachi music, and absolutely zero regard for noise ordinances. But the real victory happened 3 weeks ago during our first democratically elected HOA meeting. Dan Morrison, our new president, addressed 18 neighbors in Martha's living room, the same Martha who'd hidden her garden gnomes for 6 months under Cordelia's reign of terror. First order of business, Dan announced with cop-level authority, we're officially repealing every violation notice issued during the Whitmore administration. Second, we're establishing the Fletcher Donovan Emergency Access Fund to help any neighbor facing property harassment. The applause echoed through Martha's house like freedom bells ringing. Jim Santos's service dog barked along enthusiastically, no longer worried about noise citations. My phone still buzzes with interview requests from across the country. Good Morning America wants annual updates. 3 different production companies have pitched reality shows called Bulldozer Justice, Heavy Equipment Heroes, and Karen Crushers. But the call that mattered most came from a farmer in Oklahoma whose HOA was threatening to seize his property for keeping chickens. Fletcher, he said, his voice shaking with the kind of desperation I remembered from that October morning. They're trying to take my land because my rooster crow's too loud for the subdivision they built around my family farm. Jake and I flew out there the next week with legal precedents, documentation strategies, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing bullies eventually meet their match. We didn't need a bulldozer this time, just property law, constitutional rights, and the precedent that Donovan v. Whitmore had established across 3 states. The Emergency Access Foundation has helped 47 families fight HOA harassment, prevented 12 illegal property seizures, and established legal aid clinics in rural counties where developers think grandfather clauses are suggestions rather than constitutional law. The sweet smell of justice mixed with diesel fuel has become our unofficial signature scent. Last month, Dr. Blake brought her daughter to one of our therapeutic riding sessions. 7-year-old Lisa has cerebral palsy and had never been on a horse before meeting the same animal Cordelia tried to let die for real estate schemes. Watching that little girl's face light up as she sat on my horse's back, feeling his gentle strength beneath her, reminded me why some fights are worth having. Every October 15th, the anniversary of Bentley Crushing Day, we hold the Willowbrook Freedom Festival on my property. Local news covers it like a holiday. Vendors sell Don't Block My Driveway t-shirts, and kids compete in the Pin the Violation notice on the Karen game that Martha invented. The festival's centerpiece is my Bulldozer, polished to perfection and surrounded by flowers planted by every family Cordelia had terrorized. Visitors can sit in the cab, learn about property rights from Jake's legal education booth, and hear the engine that sounds exactly like justice at full throttle. As I finish my coffee and head out to feed my horse, the morning sun catches the metallic gleam of my bulldozer blade, still sharp enough to cut through entitlement and strong enough to move mountains or luxury cars that block dying animals from medical care. If you've survived your own HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. Every tale of neighborhood tyranny defeated helps protect property rights for families everywhere. And smash that subscribe button for Karen stories, where entitled bullies meet consequences, property rights win every time, and justice sounds exactly like heavy machinery solving problems one crushed luxury car at a time. The sweet roar of freedom never gets old.